And welcome to Inside the Outhouse for 3rd of May 2021. My name's David Maskell, sitting in for Pete Smith this afternoon, who is in the field. Welcome to International Week for the Outhouse crew. We have a very busy week of international Zoom meetings coming up and connections around the globe. And not least, but this weekend, tonight's session is all about South Africa with Alan Champions. But first, I'm going to throw to Sheree for a acknowledgement of country.
Inside the Outhouse acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognize the continuing connection to lands, waters, and communities. We pay our respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders both past, present, emerging.
Thanks, Sheree. I'd just like to acknowledge the Outhouse members in the oligarch who aren't here tonight, busy in the field or working or studying. So that'd be Henry Friend, Maddie Malone, and Pete, and obviously Sheree. Without further ado, I'm going to throw to Alan, who's going to give us perspective, burning questions of what's going on in South Africa in terms of outdoor education, their response to COVID, and sit back and enjoy. Alan.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share of an overview. Let's see if I can get. Hold on. I've lost my screen.
Always technical errors.
Okay, wait. Let's see.
It's Alt S to get it up on a.
No, I've got it here.
There we go. We've got it.
You got it?
Great, we got it.
Okay. So thanks for the opportunity to share an overview of what you call outdoor education and what we call adventure-based experiential learning in South Africa. I've been involved in outdoor learning or in the industry for the last 17 years. I'm currently based as a program manager at Simonsburg Christian Centre, just outside Cape Town, in the middle of the winelands of Stellenbosch. Here's our campus just in the trees, or what we call our venue just in the trees here at the foot of the Simonsburg Mountain, and we are surrounded by vineyards and farmland. Most of my work involves school learners, and I see about 3,500 learners a year from all walks of life. And today I'm going to be talking about my own personal experience of the outdoor industry in South Africa. I'm not representing any particular association or organization, and rather just sharing on my own understanding of what we've seen and what we've experienced over the last year and before. South Africa itself is a nation with a great love for outdoors, much like Australia. It's got a long history of outdoor adventures and people being outside. I'm sure you all heard of Lord Baden Powell, who started the scouting movement in the UK. Well, he wrote his book, the Aid to Scouting Training Manual during the Boer War here in South Africa. In the first half of the last century, we had various national youth movements that were started, and our first outdoor leadership center was opened in the 1950s. And this was followed by Ian Player, who of great conservation fame, who started the Wilderness Leadership School in 1957. The next 50 years saw a big increase in outdoor education in South Africa, and the formation of what we called felt schools, which is, I suppose we call now your outdoor environmental education, where learners were taken outside by government-owned or government-recognized facilities and spent a week really roughing it. Camp Staldraad comes to mind, Camp Steel Wire. Would be the name of it. Back in the days when it was rough and ready and people were outdoor education and outdoor experiences was how much of a man you are. or becoming a man. That's all changed these days. In the 1980s, environmental education started to gain traction, both in schools and in the outdoors. And by the late 1980s and early 1990s, we had the first associations that were being formed. And by 1990, the value of outdoor experiential learning was officially recognized. And in many ways, the 1990s and the early 2000s was a peak season for business for many. By 2019, there was a great variety of options in adventure-based learning. And pre-COVID, according to some sources, there were about 400 centers in South Africa, with many organizations and businesses that were running their own programs. In other words, going to a place or going to a venue rather than actually owning a center. And we have many youth and school organizations that continue to run their own camps and have a camp culture, which we're really lucky about here in South Africa. There's a great variety. Obviously, the one that stands out the most and what I'm involved with is center-based programs. Many of the sites offer environmental education, life skills, team building, leadership development, faith and cultural programs, and gap years, and everything in between. And everything in between. We have camps that are offering, or venues that are offering just low ropes, initiatives, games, challenges, right the way through to high ropes, whitewater rafting. I think much like you've got in Australia. And then we've got many people that are also doing offsite programs. So what we would call treks, where groups are taken for extended periods out into the wilderness or across farmland. And these vary from a few days up to, I believe some groups do them up to 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. We've got wilderness programs. Outdoor therapy is slowly gaining traction here. It's not as recognized as it is in many other parts of the world, but it is gaining in popularity. Community development, where groups are taken into areas to help out, or youth are taken into areas to help out with community development. And then more and more, we have a lot of groups or organizations that are actually going to schools to run the program on the school property. Some such, this on the left is us here at Simonsburg, hiking in the mountains. And then the wise ones do not hold the African rock python at the head. So, like everywhere in the world, we have our challenges, we have our positives, we have our negatives. Pre-COVID, the industry was in a state of flux, I suppose is the best way to put it. And we had a number of challenges that we were facing. The first one was affordability. So as costs were increasing and we were finding that accessibility was decreasing, and South Africa has a large percentage of youth that are on or below the poverty line. And so school camps or school excursions are unaffordable for them. Unless someone's willing to sponsor or fundraise or pay for a school to go, they don't get the opportunity that many of the wealthier schools do. So for some, it's seen as the outdoors are seen as a privilege. For most people and most organizations here in South Africa, we work on a high volume and a low margin business model, and there's lots of competition, so pricing is quite tight. And as a result of that, we feel that or sometimes we feel that you can offer much more value and be able to put your prices up, or should be able to put your prices up and become more profitable, but other centers are keeping the prices down, and as a result, it kind of restricts your growth, and certainly your financial growth, and it restricts your ability to offer then your programs to all across the board. We are required here in South Africa for schools to get the government approval from the Department of Education before they can go on camps. In the past, that wasn't traditionally a problem, but more and more it's becoming an issue. We had an event last year, which we had a drowning last year on a school camp in January, which made news headlines. And many of the camps really lost a lot of business because the Department of Education simply said no school excursions until this is all sorted out. And camps that didn't have their risk management documents in place weren't allowed to continue with schools. And even today, it's still so an example here was, it didn't really affect us so much because we were in a different province, but we still got schools asking and saying, you can't do any water activities. The department won't allow a school to come on an excursion if you're offering any water activities. That's even down to swimming in the swimming pool. There's been over the years, an increased priority of academics over holistic development. So numeracy and literacy is seen as the most important aspect of the curriculum here, one of the most important aspects. And of course, as a result, outdoor education slides down in the value scale. And then where do we fit in? We've had this discussion before, I think, on Inside the Outhaus or with others, is we are seen sometimes as the outsider. Because we host groups, we should technically be under tourism. Because we are working with the Department of Education, we should be under education. And then because we are involved in culture and recreation and sports, some people say we should be fitting under there. And what's ended up happening is we actually don't fit under any three of them. No one really wants to take responsibility for us. There's very little representation at a government level, both from within the school camp industry and externally. And so when it comes to places like now with Enoch and Pianzi drowning last year and COVID, we sit here desperate for someone to talk out for us and say, this is where we're at and this is the regulations we fit under, and we don't actually have anything. Qualifications and training is an ongoing issue because we don't know really where we fit under education, tourism, or culture. We have a gap in what is officially required. So for your high-risk activities, there is legislation, there's working at heights and occupational health and safety. But when it comes to games and initiatives and low ropes and your what might be termed low-risk activities, there's no real, well, let's say, that's not put it, there's a big gray area. And then the next one is risk management, risk aversion, and tragedy. So as I mentioned earlier, we had a drowning last year, and it really affected the industry as a whole. We are seeing more and more teachers and school groups or parents are becoming more risk adverse, whether it's just a culture across the world or it's here in South Africa, we're not sure. But camps are seen as being risky. And unless you've got all your risk management documents in place and you can prove it with unless you've got all your risk management documents in place, those groups that don't then are being slowly forced out of the industry or having to change. COVID, well, let's not talk about that. We're just talking earlier about how the moment there's any hint of an increase in infections, bookings seem to block off here. So last year, where I am, we see about 3,500 people a year, learners a year on school camps. And from March 15th, physical distancing was announced, and I think it was on the 27th of March last year that we went into a hard lockdown. But from the 15th of March until the 15th of March 2020 to 2021, we went from 3,500 learners to 80 on a school program. It's had devastating financial losses. There are a number of camps and venues that have closed. There are a number that have been mothballed. Others are, the staff are still allowed to carry on the property and just keep going and see if they can get income in. And lots have been forced to adapt in some way. Our current legislation is that we can operate, but we have to wear masks. We have to have physical distancing programs, physical distancing at all times, and we're only allowed to operate under a 50% capacity. So even if we were back to normal and having normal group bookings, we would still only be able to have 50% of what we had pre-COVID. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, and a lot of doubt as to where the industry is going in the future or how it's going to recuperate or recover. The economy as a whole is struggling. So not only is COVID an issue, but we've had a number of schools saying to us, our parents can't even afford to pay school fees this year. So how can we ask them to come on a camp or pay for a camp? As a result, we've started to take our programs to schools, and we've had some interest in it. There's also a lot of schools that are saying we have to catch up on activities still, and catch up on curriculum still. But it does offer an alternative. The catch is, though, with a centre is you need the income in the centre. You need the catering, you need the accommodation, and you need the program money, rather than just going to a school for the program. Some camps that I know of have become caravan sites and campsites. And as I said earlier, there's been closures, retrenchments, and a loss of trained staff. So even here, my facilitators here, instructors here, have hardly worked in a year. And many across the country have been forced to go and find alternative employment. So when we start up again, we're going to be faced with the challenge of having trained and qualified staff, and where do we get them from? So while everyone says you can't have people on a low ropes course and in slops or flip-flops or whatever you want to call them, just in our context here, sometimes we have learners or kids coming on camps that can't even afford closed shoes. And so we make a plan. So what is the future? Well, on a positive side, there's been a massive growth in people wanting to get outside. We are seeing a huge spike in people going out, walking, hiking, and doing activities that are low cost, easily accessible, and also we can keep your distance. So for us, we need to, as centers, figure out a way to meet that need, but at least the benefits for now of getting outside are being realized. There's a growing need for social and emotional learning and emotional health. I think the lockdowns here, certainly the hard lockdowns here, have hurt a lot of people badly. And emotional health is going to be an ongoing issue for years to come. And the catchphrase is, let's rather be socially connected and physically distant, has become a mantra for us. Yeah, and how can we restore social connections and really emphasize that in the camps. We're seeing a lot smaller and more specialized programs coming through. So where I might have worked with 80 or 100 learners in a group before. Now we rejoice when we have 8 or 10 or 12 coming. And the programs have been more specific and more specialized as a result. And maybe it's the end of the sausage factory type program where you have one in and one out. And it's a time for us to say, how can we really meet a specific need, and what is our niche in the industry? And adventure-based learning, I believe, is ideally positioned for recreating connections, for building communities, and re-establishing trust. COVID has made people fear other people and fear the unknown. And like I said to a group this weekend, we could understand where risk was before because we could see it. Now we can't see it. And everyone is aware. All you have to do is cough once and everyone looks at you. And how do we break that barrier of beginning to accept people again and rebuild trust as a community? Because if we can't build trust, we're going to continue to be suspicious of everyone. And that's not going to have a positive outcome. And then lastly, hopefully going forward, we're going to see the establishment of peak bodies and have greater representation and higher standards in the industry. The year has, well, the drowning at the beginning of the last year, and then COVID, of course, has forced a lot of people with this interest in the industry to reconsider, what does it mean to be part of it? What do we need, and how can we form something that is going forward that will be representative of everyone in the industry, from facilitators and instructors to programs, to risk, to suppliers, to centers. And so we've had a couple of organizations or associations that have started in the last 13 or 14 months. And I really look forward to them starting to have an influence at a national level and people joining and working together to find a solution. So we had a defining moment. I think that's the best way to put it. For me, over the last 17 years, my personal defining moments have been Richard Louv's The Last Child in the Woods and Understanding Nature Deficit Disorder, understanding emotional health and impact that spatial development or the loss of spatial development has happened and is happening, is the loss of spatial development and what it's doing to young people, and the importance of social and emotional learning. As an organization or as a country, I believe that adventure-based learning in South Africa is at a defining moment. COVID has forced us to be introspective as well as to look outside of us, to see how we can join forces, how we can hold hands, how we can link together to fight for the industry, to find a future, and to be relevant. It's just like in the 1950s when it started and people were really pushing to say this is something that's new. So we had a pivotal defining moment again and saying, how can we be relevant in schools? How can we be relevant in organizations? And how can we push the benefits of being outdoors to everyone and make it accessible to everyone? And so in closing, one of my favorite quotes is, today might be the day a kid remembers you in about 20 years from now. Make it awesome. And how do we make it awesome under COVID? How do we make it awesome with our current regulations? And how do we make it awesome just for each and every person that comes that we meet in the outdoors? Because we have a really amazing tool to help and meet a need. And I really look forward to seeing it growing for the country itself, or outdoor education or adventure-based learning in the country to become well established again, and for us to draw hands, just like we're doing here with Inside the Outhaus and other organizations across the planet. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. That was really informative and really insightful. And I've got a whole bunch of questions here I'm going to throw you in a second, and I think Sri and David's come into the room as well. So welcome, David, to a small boutique start to international week here. I want to take you back to the beginning of your presentation when you said initially in the 50s when camps began, and then in I think the 90s there was a big cultural change and the industry exploded. What was the key motivation for the change in the industry? Was it someone's theory? Was it taking on board values of a different organization or outside influences, or was it a curriculum-driven change around bringing curriculum into adventure-based learning?
Okay, so I stand to be corrected, but from my understanding, in the early 1990s or mid 1990s, the Department of Education changed the curriculum to outcomes-based education. And outdoor education or adventure-based learning has always been outcomes-based. So for us, it was, wait a moment, we are in a pivotal position here to be able to assist with outcomes-based education, and the department recognized also the importance of getting young people outside on excursions, on camps. It had been there before, but it really, I think it was a case of South Africa opening up after apartheid. It was a case of a good solid groundwork being done and a good reputation being done in the 70s and the 80s by lots of different organizations. Environmental education became a thing. Before the 80s, it was there, but it was hardly known. And so South Africa began to get recognized. And because South Africa was an outdoor country, it was seen, let's get everyone outside. And so I think up until the mid 2015, about 2015, 2016, 2017, it was the boom period. And since technology has come in, we've actually started to see what I believe, a slight decline in numbers, where teachers are more interested in, well, let's say, let me rephrase that. So if you have a positive experience in the outdoors, it leads to it leads to yourself actually becoming interested in the outdoors. And when I look at it today, a number of the teachers and people coming through, they've grown up on technology. They haven't grown up in the outdoors. And so we are sitting here saying, how can we still be relevant? How can we still say to people and teachers and that, actually, come outside. It's not as bad as you think it is. Take kids on a camp. It's not as bad as you think it is. We will help you. The admin load is getting more and more from the department. And so we're trying to say, how can we assist in that also? How can we show you that the benefits of bringing young people outside extend right the way through to the classroom environment also, not just from an educational perspective, but from a social dynamic, from an emotional dynamic, from a young people listen to each other, work better on team activities, and your co-curriculum and hidden curriculum is just as important as your core curriculum.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying in the session earlier about people now getting outdoors, that hopefully this would be the catalyst for that. If more people are going outdoors now, they can see the value in it and then see the value that you have as outdoor educators. You certainly have the scenery for it there. All the photos that I see on your Facebook are just absolutely stunning. So I can't imagine why people don't want to go outside there. And I think that just from listening to what you were saying, I think Australia can actually relate to a lot of what you're saying. You're talking about being risk adverse. And, I think Australia is becoming very risk adverse right now as well, like maybe not to that degree, but, we see that in the increase in our insurance prices because, they've now decided that what we do is too risky, even though it hasn't, the risk really hasn't changed. And then like the idea that you were talking about having trained staff and how that's really been affected by COVID. And I think we're seeing that here as well, because a lot of people are leaving the industry because of what's happened and not having the work. And so then that puts a lag into the training that the staff that we do have on board. So I definitely think there's a lot of relating points between.
I think we relate more to you than anyone else when I look at it, both in the style of the activities you run, the type of centers we have, and the challenges we're facing.
One question I had was, are there any studies being done there or about the effects or benefits of the outdoor experience and how it can help with some of those emotional type of all the things that are going on now, like the fear and the stuff like that?
Sherry, I'm not sure. I know that I was chatting to someone earlier last year, or in the middle of last year, and they were talking about the need for exactly that in South Africa. Much of our research comes from the UK, it comes from the States, and it comes from Australia or New Zealand. And there's very little that is specific to South Africa. A friend of mine and a colleague has done his doctorate on outdoor education in South Africa. Last year, I participated in a research paper, or was interviewed for a research paper, or someone looking at that also on the effects of school camps and the influence that they have. But there's definitely scope for a lot more of it to be done.
You were saying that the numbers of people just going out recreating, just ordinary people, maybe city people that wouldn't have gone out before, is increasing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, very much so, David.
We're noticing that in northeast Victoria. We're about 3 hours from a city, so people have actually got to come and stay somewhere. Very few of them probably camp, but we're up about 60% on people visiting our parks. And many of them aren't people that would have gone overseas and can't now. They're actual people that didn't go outdoors at all. Yeah. Yes. And during the lockdowns, went to their local parks, suddenly realised the value of not being locked in a flat. And I'm hoping that, forgetting the science of the thing, that many of those people who are now enjoying a view and a walk will think differently about getting their children to go on school camps and a whole range of things. So it might be, the pub test type level might be the way that both in your country and our country, that we improve the number of kids that come out, just simply because the parents suddenly realise the personal value.
No, very much so. And I think that's why I put it as one of the positives, that it's a defining moment for us also. We've seen in South Africa, there's been a tremendous increase, particularly in the low-cost activities outside, as I said. With it has gone, of course, we have some trails on Table Mountain and other places that are being excessively used, and there's been a very poor understanding of leave no trace that goes with it. And so one of the things that we could almost do is looking at saying is, how can centers here become educational in the sense of view of giving value back, or saying to people, this is why we value our open spaces and our natural areas, and this is how we can look after them, and teaching no trace principles to children, teaching sustainable development, teaching good environmental practices, even just the simple things. And for facilitators and instructors to be able to get out there, I know one of a few people are saying we need more, just people going and saying, I'll volunteer to lead hikes for people who've never been out before, just to monitor them, keep them safe, and to ensure the environment's well looked after.
Hey, Alan, you mentioned one of the things that you're looking forward to, I guess, post-pandemic would be having a stronger peak or peer body. It sounds like you currently don't have that sort of system in South Africa. Would that be correct?
Well, there isn't, let me be careful what I say here, because there's quite a bit of politics around the industry. So there are a couple of bodies that are forming or have formed, but there isn't any official, this is what the government says is the way, this is the body that we must follow and the legislation we must follow.
So in Australia, we have, and we're not, the ants pants, but we've done it well here. We have our state-based peak bodies, so Outdoors Queensland, Outdoors New South Wales, and ACT, Outdoors Victoria, all over the place. But they act as an advocate and a connection between people in industry, such as ourselves, and the government policymakers, and they influence or seek to influence those decisions. You are just starting that process in, would you say, in South Africa?
Yeah. There was something in place in the 80s and the 90s that started, and then it seemed to just disappear. For whatever reason, I don't know. There was even a government-sponsored training center at one stage. And then I think because no one really understood where we fit in between education or tourism. So from a tourism perspective, you can get your formal training as a adventure-based guide and become an adventure guide, which would include your high ropes and your abseiling and your mountain walking, all those skills. But the gray area exists as a center. What do you, for all the other activities, more than just your high ropes, and then a venue would fit under, if you understand, your venue would fit under hospitality. But because we're associated with the Department of Education or doing or working with schools, we seem to have this bridge that cannot be crossed. The Department of Education acknowledges centers and their relevance and their importance, but doesn't want to take them on. They don't see them as educational.
Okay, so so it was a bit of a good segue, I thought. Do you have a national qualifications framework for your instructors, but it's just missing some soft skills, it sounds like, for the needs of outdoor centers?
There is a qualification framework that has been written, but it's hardly been used. So, and because it's hardly been used, it's now in 2023, I think, is it's coming up for review. And it's one of those, well, because the industry hasn't accepted it or hasn't used it, is it going to stay? And so at the moment, there's a big scramble amongst various bodies to say, let's rewrite stuff, let's put new things in place. So it's a good opportunity. But yeah, there is a gap a big gap between soft skills and hard skills.
Well, certainly with COVID, one of the things that was glaringly obvious in Australia was that we didn't have a central representative peak body on a national level. Yeah, we had reasonable groups at state, and there's the Camps Association that's national in camps, and some education organisations, but we didn't have a national peak body to represent all of the outdoors to the federal government. And the federal government, of course, is where the most of the funding we needed to get should have come from. And of course, we didn't have that. And that's one of the things we're working towards, I guess, at the moment, or considering anyway.
Well, that's been our argument also, is that we really needed representation now for the government and Department of Education. So during COVID, because we're one of the industries. I mean, tourism has been hit hard, and events has been hit incredibly hard also. And we're one of the industries that has had no representation and really been taken a beating. So we can't go to the government and say, look at us, we need help. There's been no formal assistance for our industry from a government level.
Going along with that, have you had, so with the establishing of these peak bodies and outdoor providers, do you guys connect with each other in any way? Is there a way to connect with other outdoor providers within South Africa?
Oh, yes. So I'm a member of Christian Camping Southern Africa, which pre-COVID had about 80 to 100 member sites. I'm a member, there's a South African Adventure Industry Association, which formed up last year, which I'm a member of or associated with. There's another organization called the Alles Guild, Adventure, Learning, Leadership, Education and Sports, it stands for. That's representing, I think, about 100, 120, 130 different venues or getting established to represent them. And so we are fairly connected. There's WhatsApp groups, there's social media, but there would be nice to have an actual covering body, a formal recognized body that can connect everyone together.
I think in some ways it sounds like maybe we need a Outhaus South Africa edition for you
That'll be good.
all of these people together.
Has there been a lot of Zoom meetings between those organizations? Have they taken on the new technology and everybody in isolation now?
I think we are a nation that loves the outdoors more than we love Zoom. I've been part of a few meetings over the last year, but they are sporadic, and that's not saying that they don't happen. It could be that I'm just not included in them. But certainly from a perspective of of everyone getting together. So I know the South African Adventure Industry Association has had a few. Christian Camping Southern Africa has had a few. And then the Alles Guild, I think it has had one or two also. So there's been attempts, but they're not very well attended.
Can I just take you back to one more question, because I've got to jump out of the meeting shortly, and I'll hand off to Pete, who's now arrived. But the drowning death that occurred last year, which sounds really horrible, and I've been involved in near drownings and also critical incidents in the field in my career. It has a major effect on the industry and the organisation that it occurs with. Have there been many learnings that you're aware of from that issue and that incident, and what might they be for the South African outdoor industry?
Well, I speak under correction, but from that incident there, it was all around negligence. Roll calls weren't done. I can't remember the ratio of facilitators to learners, but I think it was about 10 to 200. And they put the learners went into a river that was flowing faster than normal, and some of them couldn't swim. So it was, when you put everything together, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. It shouldn't have happened at all. And one of the big things, obviously, immediately the Department of Education said, you cannot go on in Gauteng province, where Johannesburg and Pretoria are, they banned all school excursions immediately. Down here in the Western Cape and other provinces, the requirement was that there's no water activities, and the school may not go on an excursion until the Department of Education has signed it off and the venue can prove that they've got their risk and liability documents and their safety documents in place. So for many places, it was a big scramble to make sure that you've got your documentation. And I think for an industry as a whole, it was once again we're dealing with people's lives. We need to be professional.
Just as a question, Alan, do you have any anything equivalent to our National Adventure Activity Standard Good Practice Guide system?
I haven't seen your National Adventure Activity Good Practice Guide. We do have, so there are what we call unit standards that are there, and qualifications for where you can get formal training in your high ropes and your mountain walking, mountain leading, whitewater rafting. We do have those associations, and we do have qualifications in those, which are a requirement. So, but the flip side is many places do their own in-house training, and that's where the standard varies.
Well, the good practice guides, it's taken us 25 years to go from nothing to state-based to national, but they're not about qualifications. They're about how to run a safe activity and what you should consider. They're good practice guides about developing your operational procedures within an organisation. Yeah, qualification is only a part of it. Yeah, where you might consider. It would be worth having a look at them on any of our state peak bodies or on the Outdoor Council of Australia website, because you could probably, I mean, I started the bloody things. I reckon you could steal it, yeah, and just put South Africa and a few other things. We don't have a swimming one yet, and we've got to write a few others. But they've been the thing that's kept insurers in the field to some degree,
Yeah.
and kept land managers and lots of agencies relatively confident that we know what we're doing, because now we've got something where theoretically everyone across Australia, every camp, every activity should at least the operator and the leaders should have at least read the standards and hopefully come into their practices. So that could be something you could grab the concept and amend it to your own area. I think that would be quite useful.
Thank you. I think that would be great.
Question:
Yes,
are there insurance requirements for?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Even the insurance industry doesn't have a great understanding of what we do. So for some, we automatically just labeled high risk. I remember, so we don't do any high ropes here. We don't have zip line any longer because the insurance premiums for it are through the roof. A few years ago, we had a zip line and I wanted to redo it, to give an example. And our insurers, we questioned with our insurers what the requirements were for it. And they got back to us and said, as far as we know, there are no standards for zip line, but they were, because they had been established already. There's occupational safety and working at heights. And there's an organization that the South African Line Operators of South African, I can't remember what it's called, but there is a Zip Line Operators Association, and they had published documentation on it. So, the moment someone says to you, we're taking kids outside, it's deemed automatically as high risk. And it would be great to be able to have one insurer saying that this is what we cover and knowing what it is, and secondly, the industry itself being able to say, we know what we're doing and we can prove it.
Fair enough. Well, I'm just really interested too, and we might have covered this before, but what drew you to Inside the Outhouse, and what kind of brought you here, and why do you enjoy being here?
I think it was a case of looking to connect with others. So I in the past, I've connected with quite a few people in the States, and I can't remember how I found Inside the Outhouse at all, but maybe I found it on Facebook or social media, or I've been looking at some of the Australian sites and looking for information, and it's been really great to connect with you. I love the small group. I love the openness. I've loved the similarities I think that we have in being able to connect with each other and to chat to each other, and also just it's been great. It really has been good. I've really liked it.
Good. I mean, I'll speak for the whole group and say that we've all really enjoyed you being a part of this group, because it gives it some different perspective, and it gives us some outside perspective that we don't always get. So it's been a really joy, a big joy to have you guys or you as part of this group, and you're pretty consistent. So we really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the big thing is that most of your topics have been so relevant, and also it's been really nice to connect with people who are in the same industry but might see things in a different angle. So for me, it's been fantastic. It really has. I've enjoyed our Mondays.
I might jump in and say, unless anyone's got any other questions for Alan on his amazingly detailed and informative, I feel like I know a whole bunch more about South African outdoor that I had no idea about before, which is, again, the reason we're having these conversations even a year and a bit on from start of the pandemic. I might let Pete jump in here as well if he's got a few words to say.
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple of things. Wow, Alan, it sounds like I missed a classic presentation from what everyone has said. Thank you so much for coming inside, and I look forward to listening to it on the recording, which is the beauty of our job. I've been chasing elite athletes around the Sunshine Coast hinterland. But anyway, now I'm here. I will second what Cherie and Dave have both said. It's been amazing to have your perspective and input inside the Outhaus, and we hope it continues and we have a long relationship in the future.
Thank you, Peter. It's been great. It's been an honor. I really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you.
Have you guys shamelessly plugged our AORE thing yet?
No, if you want to do that, Pete, I'm about to put the link in the chat.
Okay, tomorrow morning, our time, 6 a.m., which, as I messed your time up when I was talking to you the other day, Alan, I'm not really sure what time that is in your neck of the woods, but we are presenting a webinar to the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education, which is one of two peak bodies in the US, about Australia's response to the COVID pandemic. Our little organization. I feel quite proud.
Yeah, well done. It's 10 p.m. here. Hopefully I'll join.
Love to have you there. Because it's a webinar, you can't actually join the chat. All you can do is watch the video of the Outhaus people and the facilitators from AORE.
Correction, sorry, you don't have any video, but you can put in requests of questions to the moderators. So you can have join the chat bit, but you won't have any video or get to ask questions. But
okay. Anyway, tomorrow at 10 p.m, if you're not doing anything else, we'd love to have you listen. It will be posted on our socials, but you can listen to it in your own time, recorded later.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, I was once again say on behalf of the Outhaus team, thanks to Alan for presenting and putting together a really good presentation. And I believe on our next Outhaus, we'll reattempt to connect with
Matt.
Yes, with Matt, and have another presentation in 2 weeks' time. So I do appreciate everyone's attendance today, Mr. Chitty and Alan and the Outhaus.
Greetings, Dave. Chitty.
And at this point, I'm going to stop the recording. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.